What is up? Happy Friday. Welcome to week 15. And I make this joke every single season. I think week 15 might be the most popular week for DFS because half your league just got eliminated from the fantasy playoffs and you got to scratch that itch somehow. We are here to help. This is the DFS Academy, Club Fantasy's weekly DFS show. We're going to break down the week 15 main slate and hopefully help you guys win some money, find a new passion in DFS, scratch the itch that your redraft team has left you with, or maybe you're on bye and just need something to do this week. Let's build some lineups. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy. Week 15 in the NFL. Fantasy playoffs are here. Saturday games are here. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how's your fantasy playoffs shaping up so far? You got some bye weeks out there?
I don't think I have any bye weeks, which is unfortunate, but I've made the playoffs in several spots. The conundrum I have, though, is all of my best spot teams that advanced have players that I need to do well, that I probably don't need to do well in my dynasty and redraft leagues. But that's why I like DFS, because you know what? You just get a little bit of exposure to everyone and you end up happy at some point.
Yeah, I like it. That's absolutely right. For me, like I said, DFS is kind of that escape. I build some rosters using players from my opponent's rosters. So that way, if I get knocked out of the playoffs because of how well they did, it works out well. Unfortunately, Austin, while I have Josh Allen in one DFS league, in one dynasty league, I did not play him at all in DFS last week. And let's just move on a little bit here. We call it answers to the test. Austin, it was an incredible week for the Milli maker. We like to break down for folks what could have made them $1 million, what made someone else $1 million, and 281.68 points, which is 20 points more than the season high to this point. They eclipsed that number by a lot, Austin. And I don't think you're going to be surprised to hear Josh Allen was their quarterback. Isaac Arendo at running back to go with Zach Charbonnet, Puka Nacua, Khalil Shakir, Darnell Mooney, Pat Freiermuth, Jordan Addison, and the Steelers defense. I was going to ask, have you ever seen anything like what we saw Josh Allen do, Austin? But you haven't, because it's the best quarterback performance in the last 20 years. What a game the Rams and the Bills put on for us last week.
Yeah, what's funny about it is it was the highest total on the slate. So it was like, this is probably the game
Interesting.
you want to have action on. Turns out that was correct. You did want to have action on the game. And I did avoid the matchup a little bit more than I think I clearly should have, because I was a little bit skeptical that it was going to actually play out, because the way these teams tend to go, like sometimes I could see this game hitting the under, but they smashed the over too, right? The over under last week was at 49.5. They combined for 86 points. Absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. While we're talking about games that did or did not live up to expectations, I think I'm going to have to eat a little crow here. We got into it last week on Minnesota and Atlanta, and it was a 63-point over-under. I wasn't afraid of the Minnesota side. I was afraid of the Atlanta side. However, Kirk Cousins did throw for 344 yards, no touchdowns. Bijan Robinson did his thing. Darnell Mooney did his thing and shows up in this lineup. Austin, when I was kind of looking at this lineup, I got eerie feelings about discussions we've had this entire season. So first of all, the Buffalo stack with the Rams bring back. This is Milli Maker 101. You stack a quarterback with a wide receiver. He went Allen and Shakir, and then you bring back your favorite player from the other team, or the player you can afford from the other team. He goes Puka Nacua. And then something you have been reiterating, because I play the pessimist on this show all the time. Don't be afraid to go with the cheap chalk. He literally took I don't know the numbers, Austin, but I imagine the chalkiest two running backs that were available on the slate and won $1 million with them.
Yeah, in the Milli Maker, Isaac Arendo was at 41% rostership. Zach Charbonnet was at 43.3% rostership. I think playing both was probably actually part of the move to get different here,
Yeah.
playing both of the chalk plays, because I bet you a bunch of people didn't. I bet you they thought, oh, I'm going to either pick one or the other. And he went with both, or they went with both. The other interesting thing about this is, I think this might be the first time it's happened this year where not a single player on this lineup was less than 5% rostered. So especially not a chalky lineup, but got different in the overall build enough to be the singular winner.
Yep. Like I said, to me, this screams money maker blueprint, Milli maker blueprint, rather. Well, money maker as well, is picking the game. And again, this isn't going to win you $1 million every week, but picking the game with the highest over under, stacking a quarterback with his receiver, stacking a bring back, and then finding cheap plays at running back. It's an interesting way to do things, Austin. That's going to wrap up our tournament talk for now, guys. We're going to come back to tournament talk at the end of the show. I do want to remind you, folks, we don't just talk DFS. You can actually play with us as well. Every week, we run contests on both FanDuel and DraftKings, $2 contest. They don't quite fill up. DraftKings comes closer to filling up than FanDuel does. We run every slate on DraftKings. We run the main slate on FanDuel. You'll find links in the description of this video, but also Austin's article that drops on Saturday. Basically, you guys can come play some DFS with Austin, myself, a few really good people, one really great person who is just owning us on FanDuel this season. We'll talk about him at the end of the show because we always talk about the winners. We get to announce the winner after the slate is over, so we'll talk about the winners at the end of the show. But if you've never tuned in before, which could be a lot of people this week, as I mentioned in my intro, fantasy playoffs are here. Maybe you didn't make the playoffs. For this show, we break down cash, and then we break down tournaments. And Austin, I'm going to have you go ahead and get us started with cash. We always start with cash, as that is Austin's speciality. However, Austin, can you break down the difference for folks between cash and tourneys? It's been 13 weeks since we've talked about it. Kind of let them know why we break the show into two different segments.
Yeah, if this is your first time watching the show, first time that you're playing DFS, cash contests are going to be those 50-50s, the double up contest, and the head-to-head contest. The idea is that half of the field is typically winning, and it's an easier way for you to build your bankroll, for you to make money and be profitable week to week. Tournaments or GPP contests are going to be those large field contests. There can be small contests as well that are 100%, but the idea behind a tournament is that the money is really skewed towards the top end. You want to win those contests to get the most money, and only the top like 20% maximum actually win cash in those contests. So we have different strategies for them, because in cash, you're really looking to just beat half of the people, which means you don't need a stellar week. You need a median outcome week. This is a little bit more akin to like your redraft leagues. You don't necessarily need to like score 200 points in your redraft league every week. You need to beat your opponent. Whereas in a tournament, imagine if every week you only got to win if you beat everybody in your redraft league. You're going to build your lineup differently to give yourself the ceiling to do that. That's the kind of the mindset with tournament, and that's why we talk about them in different segments.
Yep. So we're going to talk about chalk plays being much safer in cash contests than they are in big tournaments, but don't take that too far, because we just saw last week that it doesn't have to be that way. But we're going to focus on safe and cash plays, and we're going to focus on the big swings when it comes to tournament. On the cash side of the show, Austin leads the train. I just sit here and listen. This is what Austin does. He builds his bankroll. He is a safe bettor, and it's worked out very well for him. Austin, let's get started. We call it top of the class. These are the high price players, folks. These are the $8,000 or more players on usually DraftKings, but FanDuel as well. FanDuel is always higher. Austin, you got a familiar name for us, and it's a guy I like a lot this week too.
Yeah, so we're going with Derrick Henry, who's $8,300 on DraftKings, $9,200 on FanDuel, which is still okay with me. It's Derrick Henry, so there's not much more that I need to say about that, but the game environment is actually wild. So here's an interesting little factoid about this game. The Rams. What a tongue slip there. The Baltimore New York Giants game has the second lowest total line on the week at 42.5.
Interesting.
However, the Baltimore Ravens have the highest implied team total of everybody else, which, if you're familiar with betting lines, what that means is there is a giant spread in this game. Baltimore is favored by 16.5 points. That is absurd. The Giants are awful at defending the run. And so Derrick Henry, 3 touchdowns, anyone? Like, sounds like that's what we're signing up for.
Austin, so the reason I love Derrick Henry is because every week on our Wednesday show, I pick a 2 touchdown special, and it's Derrick Henry this week. So I'm happy to hear 3 touchdowns. I jokingly, so the guys on the Wednesday show give me a hard time because rarely does the 2 touchdown special hit. It's not an easy bet. There's a reason these bets pay plus 500 to plus 1,000 sometimes, but I've done the math. If I hit this 3 times a year, it pays off. I just throw $5 on it for fun, for the fun of the show. But if I hit it 3 times a year, it pays off all the bets for the entire season. That's $85, and 3 times will pay that $85. I guess it's $90 now with 18 weeks. But regardless, I've hit 3 times this year, and 2 of those 3, Austin, have been Derrick Henry. So that's why I'm like, let's do it again. So
yeah, Derrick Henry is a reliable running back if you want that type of matchup. A little bit more stats behind it. Just one more little nugget is that the Giants have allowed the 2nd most points to running backs over the past 4 weeks. So it is also a really good matchup. I'm not really worried about, like, do they get too far ahead and does Derrick Henry get reduced touches? Because if they get that far ahead, very well could be because of Derrick Henry.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it as well. And then the couple of things I looked at just to throw in there because I researched it a bit. He hasn't scored in 2 weeks, but now he's coming off of a bye. And I feel like as much as we want to, ascend Derrick Henry to God status, he's a big guy and he's an older running back. He needed that week off. And I think coming out of this week off into the game environment that you described, where they're projected to win by 16 in a game that's projected to have like 39 points, it's going to be a really, really interesting field for Derrick Henry. And the best part about him is there's just still no competition at running back. They use Justice Hill in the passing game, but they give all the carries to him. You just got to worry about Lamar Jackson stealing anything from him. And I don't think that's going to be a problem this week.
Yeah, I don't think so either, because I also feel like they've been more willing to give Henry the ball towards the red zone and near the end zone. They don't need to bang up Lamar Jackson like that.
I think that's their exact thought process. All right, guys, that's going to be the high price player, but you still got to fill a roster in here. And we call these the band nerds. We're talking $6,000 to $8,000 players, the high mid range, if you will. The joke here, they spend too much time working on their instruments to ascend to the top of the class. And Austin, I don't know if you've had a stack here before, but it's a stack that has won over the hearts and minds of fantasy football players this year.
Yeah, I don't often like prioritize stacking necessarily in cash contest. I think it's definitely a viable strategy. I'm not saying don't do it. It's just not something that I am intending to do all the time. But this week it just fits so naturally. We're starting with Bo Nix, who's 6,300 on DraftKings, $7,600 on FanDuel. He's just been so consistent. He's coming off a bye week. The matchup seemingly isn't great against the Indianapolis Colts, but that's really because they've just been getting run all over by teams, which I will talk about more when we get to the tournament segment. But I think Bo Nix has been really consistent. He's been efficient, and they've been passing the ball enough. And we'll just go ahead and dive right into the stacking partner, because it's Courtland Sutton, who we once again are looking at for cash contest, because Bo Nix just loves throwing in the ball now.
Yes,
I don't know why it didn't start this way at the beginning of the year, but at some point Bo Nix realized, oh, I have a number 1 receiver. His name's Courtland Sutton. And since then, Sutton has been an incredible cash receiver. He is starting to get a little bit more pricey. He's now $6,600 on DraftKings. He's only $7,200 on FanDuel. So I do like him actually slightly more on FanDuel. But he's been able to kind of PPR volume his way to good output for DraftKings. So I'm still fine with him there. If Courtland Sutton gets above 7K on DraftKings, this is going to start being a conversation about, do you start him or not at that point? I hope they keep his price below 7K, because if so, I'll just keep playing him. But until then, he's going to be a cash staple.
Yeah, you're typically looking, Austin, you've always taught me with the 2 times their value. And as Sutton starts to creep up, it's there hasn't been an enormous touchdown upside. It's been a volume upside, and you need that touchdown upside with Sutton. What I was going to point out about this game is quarterbacks playing in Denver for their first time do pretty terrible. And so you have Anthony Richardson coming in here. Denver could just run away with this game, which is something obviously, like you mentioned, we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I love this stack. I love both of these players. They're both highly ranked for me this week, and I think it's a good stack.
Yeah, no, we definitely are going to go with it.
I'm going to argue with you with a player in the Bookworms section. These are the easily underestimated folks. And Austin, I'm going to have you start with a guy who your second guy here, because I am underestimating him. And I'm starting to get the sense that I'm truly underestimating him, that I've went too far after what we saw last week. So folks, these are the $4,000 to $6,000 plays. And Austin, talk me off the ledge on Braelon Allen, because after what happened over the last couple of weeks with Isaiah Davis, I'm getting a little nervous. When I came into this season, one of the biggest proponents of Braelon Allen.
Yeah, I mean, so in fairness, I haven't watched the games, so I haven't seen how this has looked on the field. But the idea being just Breece Hall, he's missed practice. I believe he missed practice today as well when we're recording this, which is on Thursday. If he misses practice on Friday, it's incredibly unlikely he's going to play. Braelon Allen is only $5,400 on DraftKings. He's $6,400 on FanDuel. And honestly, I feel a little bit on wanting to avoid him, because after I talked up Isaac Arendo and Zach Charbonnet, thought, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to go with Braelon Allen for my cash contest last week. And I did not cash. Very unfortunate on that front. But I'm still interested in going back to him in this context. I mean, part of that's because we don't have Charbonnet or Garendo on this on the slate, because Garendo's playing as we record. Charbonnet is going to also be in a primetime game, so we won't be able to add him if Kenneth Walker sits again. So it's kind of like, well, I have this really nice cheap option staring me in the face in Braelon Allen, so I'm going to go back to it. But honestly, I think it's fine to consider Isaiah Davis. Really, the idea here is like, you want to open up some salary. Like, maybe this helps you play Jamar Chase if you want to go that route. It definitely helps you play Derrick Henry. Like, it's really a salary savings play. So I think if whichever one of those guys you like, you kind of go with it. And I could see both of them being pretty heavily rostered. Probably still will be Braelon Allen more so than Isaiah Davis.
Yeah, for me, it's probably a question of my own expectations. I was like, oh my goodness, if Breece Hall misses any time, Braelon Allen is just going to be that dude. And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks ago, no, there was a bye week. 2 weeks ago, Isaiah Davis like catches a 1-yard touchdown pass and they don't give the ball to Braelon Allen. And then last week, he's more involved and scores another touchdown. He just worries me a bit, but it's to the point, Austin, where I know myself well enough that I feel like I'm overreacting. So this is probably going to be the week where Braelon Allen is like, you were right, Ryan. Too bad you didn't play me. Before you move on to your next guy, I did forget to do something in the intro because we got so caught up in the roster building 101 class. Austin just touched on this. If you listened to last week's show, Austin favored 3 running backs on the whole show. Saquon Barkley, who had a fair enough day, but his favorite 2 cheaper plays were Zach Charbonnet and Isaac Arendo. So again, those were Milli making picks that were given on the show last week. And we both were very high on Pat Fryermuth, who was a part of that Milli making lineup as well. But yeah, I do like to tout you, Austin, when you get things right. And my goodness, were you right with those running backs? And you got a wide receiver here who I like as well, who is in a very, very plus matchup right now.
Yeah, so we have the return of Adam Thielen, I guess. Like, he earlier in the season last year, he became a cash player. It was like, oh, Adam Thielen, we kind of thought he was done, headed towards retirement. And then he missed some time this year. And past 2 weeks, he has just been Bryce Young's favorite target. It was Jalen Coker there for a minute. And then, of course, I got in on David Moore as soon as Adam Thielen was popping off. But Adam Thielen, he's just getting a ton of volume. And like over the past 2 weeks, he has a combined 21 targets. It's really solid. This week, it will be an interesting matchup against the Cowboys. I do think that the Panthers are going to continue just building on the momentum they have. I think this is an interesting opportunity for them to get a win. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers pulled this one out. But even if they don't get the win, I do think these teams are at least close enough that there's going to be some back and forth, and there's going to be the need to pass the ball and keep that passing volume up. So I like Adam Thielen for that reason. It's really just a volume play, and he's only $5,400 on DraftKings. Super cheap. Like, he needs 15 points to pay off his salary and cash especially. So I'm very happy to go with Adam Thielen.
Yeah, Thielen's not exactly a punt play. We're going to talk about the punt plays in a second, Austin. But one of the things I've noticed, and we point it out every time, but I like to help people make correlations between redraft and DFS, is when we get into these cheaper players, they tend to also tie into my streams of the week. And my stream of the week quarterback is Bryce Young, because I love that Dallas matchup. And obviously Adam Thielen benefits from that. And for the second week in a row, Austin, as we get to C's Get Degrees, the best category on the show, the punt plays, you have picked my stream of the week tight end as your punt play of the week. So it worked last week with Pat Fryermuth, obviously. So
yeah, well, we're starting to spend too much time together, because when I made this pick, I thought, I wonder if Ryan is also going to be in on Grant Calcaterra this week.
Ryan is in on Grant Calcaterra.
So Grant Calcaterra, in case you have forgotten who he is, because it's a weird name and he wasn't relevant before this season.
I almost wrote those exact words in my article. I said, you're forgiven for not knowing who he is.
This is the backup tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles, backing up Dallas Goedert, who is, I think, on IR. And yet,
yes, they added him on Saturday last week. So
okay, but he's still priced higher, more expensively than Grant Calcaterra.
Ooh, I found a fun, weird pricing that we'll talk about later in the show, by the way. So
like, come on, DraftKings. Like, I know you're like getting investigated by the Senate and you're getting sued by an ex-wife in New Jersey, but like, get your pricing together.
I should probably sell my DraftKings stock. We probably shouldn't talk about that on the air, though. That's like an SEC violation.
Anyways, so Calcaterra, $3,500 on DraftKings, $4,900 on FanDuel. It's really the fact that he's going to step into the starting role. He's been decently utilized when Dallas Goedert has been out. Like, it's not like going to blow the world on fire. He's not going to get like 7 catches. I mean, he could, but like probably not. He's probably getting 3 catches or 4 catches, and that's fine, because if he does that and get in the end zone, that's all you need. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have been a good matchup for tight ends in recent weeks. They've allowed the 6th most points since week 11. So there is a possibility here that it's also just a plus matchup for Calcaterra, and so that enables him to get you there even more so in those cash contests. So I really like just punting off at tight end this week, especially because I am paying up for Derrick Henry, and I need to save salary elsewhere. And there's not a good like punt quarterback option this week. There have been some in recent weeks, and so I'm actually paying like Bo Nix is not cheap, and so I just need to be able to punt somewhere, and it's easiest to do it at tight end this week.
Makes a ton of sense. The only punt quarterback that I might build a lineup out of is the aforementioned Bryce Young, just because I think there's some interestingness in that matchup. But you're absolutely right. That will not be the last time you guys hear Grant Calcaterra's name on today's show, because it just makes so much sense. Because Austin, much like you, even when I was looking at my tournament lineup, I'm kind of infatuated, as you mentioned, with these higher priced players. Like there's something to it, and it's maybe because we've seen the chalk hitting recently, and I think that's going to play out interesting, certainly in cash this week. As always, I remind you folks that Thursday night is not always the best information. We record this show on Thursday nights. So Austin drops a cash article every Saturday morning as well. So when you are ready to build your cash lineups that you're not building on Thursday night, you're going to perfect on Saturday night and Sunday morning, make sure you check out Austin's article. A lot of the players will have been repeats from tonight's show that make the article, but there's also going to be some new players, because with new information comes new players. So keep an eye on that. So that's going to wrap up the cash portion of the show. We finished the show up talking about tournament lineups. And in this segment, we're Austin plays in easier tournaments to win. I like to donate to companies like FanDuel and DraftKings to make sure they can pay off these enormous lawsuits. So I play in like Milli Maker. So Austin will still play it safe and give you the better plays here. And he also gives you enough plays to build an entire lineup. I take the big swings. Sometimes I end up with egg on my face. Sometimes it works out. Let's get into cash, Austin. So we're going to talk about let's get into tournaments, Austin. We're going to talk about our favorite quarterbacks in every position for tournament play. To move on now, Austin, what do you got?
Yeah, so I don't know if you're paying attention, Ryan, but I just added 2 names to.
I did. I watched you type it in here. I live on the show sheet on this. Once you start talking, I click over to see if like you're trying to type to me or just like look at the camera and have fun with this. But while I'm talking, the show sheet is right on my face.
So, okay, I'm going to talk about what I'm most interested in, and then I'm going to just throw a couple of guys out there because I don't like it when I have a feeling about somebody and I don't name it on the show and then they
There you
pop
go.
up. So I'm trying to avoid negative feelings later on in life. So the guy I'm going with first is Jared Goff. And this is going to be the person that I'm thinking of in my quarterback spot as I am talking to the rest of the players in this. The idea here is Buffalo and Detroit play at 4:00 at Ford Field indoors. The over-under is 54.5.
And it's 5 points higher than any other over-under. I looked at this yesterday. So.
I need to start keeping a log of total lines because I can't tell you the exact length of time it's been since we've gotten an over-under that's this big, but I know it's been I think it's been 2 years. I don't think we've gotten a single game this high this year. I don't think we've gotten a single game as this high last year. I believe I would have to go back to the first year I wrote fantasy content, which was, I believe, in 2021 when we had a total line this high, because that is how things have shifted over the past few years. Like, it is berserk that we have a total line that's at this mark. So I want access to this game. People are going to flock to Josh Allen because this man is the leading candidate for the MVP. He just broke the record for 3 touchdowns.
So he might be the first active player put in the Hall of Fame at this point because my goodness, he is doing it. So
he is doing it. So I want access to this game, but I want to think of creative ways to do it. I think this is a really, you're going to want to have Detroit and Buffalo players in your lineup almost no matter what. You might want to figure out, okay, when do I want to eat the chalk and say, I'm putting Josh Allen in this lineup? When do I want to get a little different and get off the board? Maybe put Jameson Williams in my lineup, or go to Sam Laporta, somebody that might get overlooked, or think about creative ways to build your roster within the game. So my creative ways, I'm going to be starting with Jared Goff, and I'm actually going to stack him with a running back, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the idea is just if this game pops off, we've seen it where Jared Goff is a key element of that. It's kind of similar to the Brock Purdy vibe, where he has a lot of playmakers and they'll get passing touchdowns, that the running backs will get receiving touchdowns, and that benefits Jared Goff. So he's my number one pick that I'm going with this week. I do want to follow up on what you said, Ryan, about Bryce Young, and just say yes, I'm intrigued by that. I think that he's cheap enough and the game environment is good enough that he could play really well this week. I like the idea of stacking Bryce Young and Adam Thielen in a tournament, and it is a really cheap way to start your lineup, and then you can build up elsewhere. The other person I have to mention here, I am convinced there will be a week where Kyler Murray is the key to a tournament, and I do think this is another really great opportunity for him. They're playing New England. New England has been garbage against quarterbacks. They've been good against running backs. They've allowed the most points to quarterbacks since week 11. They've allowed the 26th most to running backs in that same time. And Marvin Harrison is only $5,500 on DraftKings. This incredible generational talent is sub 6K on DraftKings. It blows my mind. I want to stack Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison once again somewhere else. I only didn't do it and this week because I think I literally have done it 2 weeks in a row already, and I couldn't make it 3.
Well, I'm going to protect you from yourself here. We got into this fight on No Punt Intended last night, and my co-host Joe Solo, enormous Patriots fan. Christian Gonzalez eats number 1 wide receivers alive this season. Even in the week where the Rams went off on New England and Kupp went for 120 and a touchdown, and Puka went for 130 and 2 touchdowns. Christian Gonzalez in that game to those 2 receivers gave up 2 catches for 9 yards. That's it, the whole game. So use caution with Marvin Harrison. There are stacks. We're going to talk about one a little bit later. There are stacks. I love Kyler Murray. And Austin, this actually lends itself to something I found interesting. I create a DFS matchup. Well, we don't call it DFS anymore, but a matchup report where I look at the last 5 weeks and who gave up the most points. A method I actually learned from you, Austin, and I just didn't realize I had a tool at my disposal. I don't think I've ever shared this with you. I guess I'll give Football Guys some free advertisement. Football Guys, all this time, Austin, where I asked you how you did this, Football Guys had a tool. I can't go back to previous seasons like you can. Like week 15 last year to week 1 this year. I can't do that because you created your own tool to do that for you. But I can look at this season and do the weekly thing. I've never shared with you that I actually have that at my disposal now. But regardless, it's not why we're here. The matchups for the quarterbacks this week, Austin, you bring up Kyler Murray. When you look at the good quarterbacks this week, the only ones that have positive matchups are Kyler Murray and Joe Burrow. Everybody else on this list of positive matchups are players you don't want to start. Will Levis bit everybody last week. Mac Jones bit you last week. Bryce Young, we do want to start. The Raiders quarterback, Brock Purdy hasn't looked great. Kirk Cousins hasn't looked great. The Giants quarterback, Cooper Rush. These are not players you're itching to start, but Kyler Murray and Joe Burrow both have top 10 matchups over the last 5 weeks, and they're the stars. So I love Kyler Murray, and that just kind of lends itself to I love Joe Burrow for that exact reason. Joe Burrow has been red hot. If not for Josh Allen, Joe Burrow would have to be in an MVP discussion for a team that's not going to win 6 games this year. It's incredible how bad the Bengals are. Joe Burrow is balling just below Josh Allen. And as I just pointed out, what I liked about him is he's getting a matchup against Tennessee, who has been getting beat up by quarterbacks. But not only that, this is a matchup of last year's offensive coordinator for Cincinnati is now over in Tennessee on a Cincinnati defense that can't stop anybody. There's a chance this turns into the second highest scoring game of the entire slate. And I want a piece of that. And so I am fully eating chalk this week because I just saw Josh Allen finally win someone $1 million. We've been talking all season. It's been bad quarterbacks. I was like, I think Joe Burrow's in a similar boat, not 3-3 because he's not going to do that, but a 4-touchdown Joe Burrow performance wouldn't surprise me this week.
Yeah, I honestly, I thought about Joe Burrow too, but then you already had him on the show sheet. So I was like, I'm not going to repeat what Ryan just said. So I do like Joe Burrow this week and stacking him with Jamar Chase. I will just go back to my Marvin Harrison thing because there's a really funny joke there after you say, oh, well, Christian Gonzalez eats number 1 receivers alive. And it's like, okay, well, good news. Marvin Harrison isn't a number 1 receiver. That's Trey McBride.
Okay, that's fair. So Christian Gonzalez covers Trey McBride, and you're right, Austin. So.
No, but that's actually is a good point. And I think to your point, there are some other receivers we can still target. But I love the Joe Burrow pick. I think it's a really interesting way to attack this slate, especially because people are going to be on Josh Allen so much.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the running backs, Austin. You got 3 of them here for us, one of which is Derrick Henry, who we've already professed our love for. So.
Yeah. So one thing is, yes, 3 running backs. I am contemplating a 3 running back build this week. Typically, I go with the receiver in my flex spot. There's usually more upside there, but I like some of the running back positions this week. So Derrick Henry is one of them, but more importantly is Jahmyr Gibbs, because this completes my stack with Jared Goff. Again, some of this is the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs catches passes from Jared Goff, and so they can get a lot of points together that way. But part of it too is this game is going to be high scoring, and if Detroit scores like 30, 40 points, there's a good chance that both Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs pop off anyways. Yep. So I'm totally fine with just playing both of them. The other running back that I'm interested in this week, and I really debated whether or not I wanted to throw this out there, but I'm doing it. It's Javonte Williams, who seems like
it's been a rough go.
Week 13 seemed like he was losing his job to Jaleel McLaughlin. We've seen a little bit more Audric Estime sprinkled in, but I think the matchup's really good. I think you are going to want a Denver running back in some of your lineups. I'm going with Javonte Williams. If you tell me, no, Austin, I've heard this thing out of camp or out of practice that Audric Estime is now the new number 1. You want to play him? Sure. Do that in a super large field tournament. Don't do it in a 100-person tournament. But I think that one of these running backs are going to pop. The Colts have been bad against running backs over the past several weeks. And I think Javonte Williams has the highest likelihood of ending up in the end zone. I also, if Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton are chalky and cash, they might be chalky in tournaments as well. Javonte Williams is a good pivot off of those 2.
Yeah, it's a way to get different in figuring out the Denver running back situation has been a fool's errand this season. And you'll hear later on when I announce my lineup, I went with the running back you haven't even mentioned yet, which is Jaleel McLaughlin. So we're gonna have a little fun with the Denver running backs this week. I wanted to go back to your Jahmyr Gibbs thing because that's something we had talked about previously. Honestly, like 3-4 weeks ago, we started talking about an interesting way to get different with a chalky lineup is stacking a quarterback with a running back. And we actually saw a quarterback, running back, wide receiver build take down the Milli maker a few weeks ago. So it's definitely doable. And that was actually quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and a bring back in that Washington game. So it's definitely doable. And it's something that does make a lot of sense. With my running back, I kind of went with the same thing, Austin. It's a game that I think people are going to want to stay away. Actually, I guess I didn't go with the same thing. I guess the Javonte Williams thing. It's a game people are going to want to stay away from. But the two running backs, I had trouble choosing between the two running backs of Chuba Hubbard versus Rico Dowdle. I went with Chuba Hubbard just because the kid has been great this season, and Dallas gets beat up by the running back. And for those who haven't heard, pour one out for Jonathan Brooks, the young kid from Texas, tore the same ACL that he tore in college. Probably going to miss the 2025 season, just depending on what kind of recovery he has. But this is Chuba Hubbard's backfield, Austin. Raheem Blackshear was already hurt. Miles Austin was already on IR. They elevated Mike Boone back to the regular squad. Chuba Hubbard might see every carry in this game for the Panthers against the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's a really banged up backfield for sure. And I think Chuba Hubbard is the good choice between the running backs in this matchup, because I have this feeling that the Panthers. So side note, my wife has decided to become a Panthers fan over the past 3 weeks. And so I've been watching more Panthers football because of that. And
hey, these are the right 3 weeks to be watching Panthers football in the 2024 season. So.
It is. They didn't get destroyed by Saquon Barkley in the best running game in the league.
That's a very good point.
I'm not too afraid of Dallas and Rico Dowdle. And so I think and I also think there's Ejiro Evero, the defensive coordinator, I think has this team playing tough and playing hard, even though the roster isn't talented on the defensive side of the ball. They purposefully depleted their defensive resources, but the coaching has been, it seems it has been really good. There's a lot of energy when they're playing defense, and I think they're rallying to the ball. And honestly, I am a little nervous about playing Rico Dowdle in any context this week, because I'm like, Carolina might continue to surprise some people this week, as they have been the past 2 weeks. They almost lost someone $3.1 million.
I was just going to promise you, I was going to ask if you saw that. If you guys did not hear the story Austin is referencing, someone bet 3.1 million on the Eagles minus 700 to beat the Panthers last week, and almost lost that bet, as Austin pointed out. So
yes, money line bets, bad bets, spread bets, tough bets to win. Don't do a lot of them. Don't put the big money on them, especially not 3 million.
Vegas ain't going bankrupt anytime soon, folks. They know what they're doing. If you win something, get it out as quickly as you can. So don't be like me, who did very, very well in betting in DFS to start the season. And Austin, my bankroll has finally depleted. I had to put more money in. So I am back to doing very small cash contests to try to build the bankroll back up. So I'll be reading the A-list far, far more seriously than I have over the last few weeks, because again, I like to donate. It's who I am as a person. Let's move on to these wide receivers, Austin. As mentioned, you are looking at a 3 running back build this week, so you have just 3 wide receivers for us.
Yeah, that's true. And just for the record, I'm up on the season by quite significantly, I would say. So that is why you listen to me on this show and not Ryan.
100%. Ryan is big swings and entertainment, folks. Austin is good information.
So I do have 3 receivers this week. Let's start with the continuation of the Buffalo-Detroit conversation. I think an interesting way to attack this is to go after Amari Cooper, who I don't think is going to get the attention.
Because everybody loves Khalil Shakir all of a sudden. That's all anybody cares about.
Which, by the way, I traded for him in a dynasty league, and I feel great about it.
I bet you
before the year started.
I didn't have to trade for him. I drafted him with a 3rd-round pick every year every week in his rookie year. So
there you go. So I think it's an interesting week to go to Amari Cooper, because he actually got a lot of targets last week in that game. It was a high volume game. It was back and forth. Could be a very similar dynamic this week where there's a lot of scoring. There's Josh Allen having to play hero ball, and that could lend itself to Amari Cooper getting there. If he scores touchdowns, like that's the other thing too. We've seen Amari Cooper have these games where he can score multiple touchdowns down the field, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, Amari Cooper, where have you been? Let me go pick him up in all of my leagues, and then the next week he poops out and
3
it's like,
points.
yeah, like that's just the way Amari Cooper is.
And that's why DFS is great, because once you get it from him this week, you don't have to play him next week. So.
Exactly. And I think this is a good scenario to go after him in. It's interesting because like the Detroit defense has actually been good this year, but they're also banged up. Yeah. And they've been playing pretty well against receivers, but this is Josh Allen. This is the Buffalo Bills. And I think too, like some of Detroit's stats are inflated. They are a good team, don't get me wrong, but they have also played really bad teams in recent weeks. So to some degree, their opponent stats are deflated to make it look like they're a tougher opponent than I think they actually might be. Two other players that I like. First off, Josh Downs. So this is actually correlating with Javonte Williams because Indy and Denver play each other this week. I like going after Josh Downs in part because he's cheap and in part because we haven't heard much from him recently. We're coming out of a bye week for Indy. I love like betting on pivots coming out of a bye week. And I'd be interested to see, does Indy get its pass game going a little bit more coming out of this bye week? Do they have their offense a little bit fresh? I mean, they get the benefit of a late bye week too. So they have just, 4 games left in the season. They get refreshed. Denver hasn't had a bye, or I think Denver might also be coming off a bye week. So
they are both week 14 buys. You're absolutely correct.
So they both have some of that same energy, but I like the idea of Josh Downs, and I particularly like it because I don't think Josh Downs is going to get the Pat Surtain coverage. I think that's going to go primarily to Michael Pittman, and that will open up Josh Downs, who primarily works out of a slot, to get a lot of targets. The last guy, this is really salary savings, and you'll understand why when you hear about my tight end pick. It's Kayshon Boutte. I like him. He's doing well in this offense. He's got the upside. He's been scoring touchdowns. He's got some chemistry with Drake May, also coming out of a bye week. So there was already chemistry being built before the bye. Now they can go workshop some things over the bye week and come out and potentially use him even more. I think Kendrick Bourne is also viable if you're playing this roster that I've built. You can also potentially trade him out. So I think it's totally fine, but it's really like saving money with a super cheap receiver. And Arizona, their defense has been tough against receivers, but they also are a little bit flaky at times. Like they can be had. So, and I like betting on New England a little bit coming out of this game, which in part is because I bet on them to win 5 games this year. So I would like for that to happen. But I do think that this could actually be an interesting matchup for them coming out of that bye week.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. Just a lot of your picks this week are coming out of bye week. So you're looking at fresh legs, new game plans being more involved. And you're absolutely right about Surtain. He's likely to cover the X receiver, which is almost exclusively Michael Pittman. But when it's not, it's Alec Pierce. I think Josh Downs is going to be safe there. So
exactly.
All of my picks are almost correlation picks. You're going to stack Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, or if you want to get real frisky, both. And then you're looking at a bring back with Calvin Ridley. Nick Westbrook-Akine kind of burned everybody last week, but specifically on DraftKings, Calvin Ridley is the PPR threat. The Bengals defense is not stopping anyone. It's the reason their offense is scoring as many points as it is because their defense can't do anything. Even a bad Will Levis. This is kind of what Austin talked about last week. We don't care if Kirk Cousins is bad as long as he is getting Drake London, Darnell Mooney. Austin mentioned Ray McLeod, who had a great week last week. I don't care how bad Will Levis is as long as he's getting Calvin Ridley the ball. However, the receiver I really wanted to talk about is Michael Wilson. And this goes back, Austin inadvertently made my point for me. I like Kyler Murray a lot this week, but I'm worried about Marvin Harrison with Christian Gonzalez. And in another sense, I'm a little worried about Trey McBride just because I think he's banged up again and coming in with a questionable tag. Michael Wilson scored a touchdown last week or before their bye week, whatever it was, but he scored a touchdown recently. We've seen big games out of him this season. He's dirt cheap, 4,400 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel, and he's the second option. And the New England secondary outside of Christian Gonzalez is just awful. I gave you guys the stats against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who Michael Wilson is not. They gave up over, almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. None of that was against Gonzalez. If Gonzalez follows Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson is going to be such a sneaky play in this. And the long and short of it, as Austin has mentioned, when you want to pay for the stars, you have to find the scrubs. Michael Wilson is that dirt cheap guy along with my tight end that's going to make it possible for me to stack Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I wasn't able to fit a Jamo. I was fully intending on going a 3 stack with a bring back just to be facetious this week, but I couldn't fit that one in there. But a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack is going to cost me some cheap players elsewhere, Austin.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to play it. And you're right. Like sometimes you just have to punt it off a cliff, and you do it in a strategic way, like thinking about like interesting matchups like that with Michael Wilson. Like I think that's a really great way to think about the punt play, but it's going to be worth it too. Like if Michael Wilson, like let's say he only scores a touchdown and a few catches and gets 12 points. Okay, cool. If Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase combined for 80, like I don't care.
Exactly. And it's such a good point. We talked about this, I think, back in like week 4, where it was, don't just look at Michael Wilson only scored 12 points. Look at what he allowed me to buy and then divide that money evenly amongst them. And everybody did what they were supposed to do. Austin, as we move on to tight ends, you mentioned you needed to save because you are not going pump play at tight end this week as I am.
No, I'm not. I'm going with Travis Kelce.
Why
and
not?
it's kind of funny that like he's kind of become a contrarian play. He's a tournament play. Like it used to be like you just need to play him in cash every week and figure out the rest of your lineup, because if you don't, you're going to be buried. Well, I don't think I've played him in cash once this year. You weren't really playing him in cash last year, but this matchup's really good. Now, the numbers are still skewed for Cleveland because 4 weeks ago, they played Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill scored 3 touchdowns on them. So, yes, the Cleveland Browns have allowed the most points to the tight end position since week 11. It's in part because of Taysom Hill, but we also just saw Pat Freiermuth score a touchdown on them. And I think more importantly here, like, the way I'm thinking about this is that Cleveland, they are still a tough defense against the run. They're not like getting gashed on the ground to opposing running backs, which I think is really crucial for this game context. Like they've allowed the 24th most points to the running back position since week 11. So translate that, that's the 9th toughest matchup.
Yeah.
They're going to have to pass. Kansas City's going to have to pass the ball. And I could see this being one of those games where Travis Kelce just finds his way into 10 catches. And if he scores a touchdown, like suddenly this is a really nice game for Travis Kelce. So I really think it's an interesting matchup there. And honestly, I don't often play tight ends or really just position players by themselves without like stacking them or correlating them with someone else in their matchup. But I'm kind of considering this week. I'm thinking about just playing Travis Kelce and getting out of this matchup because I don't really trust the Cleveland side of this game. Like it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly how it's going to go. Maybe I'll throw an Elijah Moore in there, maybe a Jerry Jeudy a time or two, but I definitely think I want to have some access to Travis Kelce this week. Yeah.
And for me, as I mentioned, it has to be a pump play. And I have 2 options. The most obvious and the option that Austin already mentioned is Grant Calcaterra. And much like you just said about Kelce, that's my exact feeling with Calcaterra is I'm not going to build a Jalen Hurts Grant Calcaterra stack. That's just not what I'm doing. But I also don't trust anybody on the Pittsburgh side on any sort of bring back or anything. So Calcaterra is going into my lineup by himself because I need cheap at tight end. And I think it's a good matchup. However, I noticed something very strange. And this is a correlation between a error with Football Guys database and still something weird with DraftKings. So on Football Guys database, Andrew Beck, the fullback for the Houston Texans, is still listed as a tight end because he kind of did that for a little while. And he is $4,000 this week for some reason on DraftKings. He's a fullback. He's $4,000. Dalton Schultz is coming off of a 17-point fantasy week. It is $700 less than that. He is only $3,300. He's appropriately priced on FanDuel, like $5,300. $3,300 on DraftKings, Austin. $200 cheaper than Grant Calcaterra. I don't know if I missed something. I don't know if Schultz is hurt. Couldn't find anything. I don't understand what's going on here. I feel like this is an actual error on DraftKings part, but Dalton Schultz, a starting tight end in the NFL who I believe is not hurt, is only $3,300.
Yeah, I don't. So I think it's not an error in the fact that they like did something wrong, but I think it's an error in that their system is a little bit dumb because they don't price running backs below 4K.
Oh, thank you. Okay. See, this is why I do shows with smart people. I had no idea. Okay. Because when I saw Beck in our system as a tight end, and I knew he had that dual eligibility for a little while, I was like, so I immediately go look up a Dalton Schultz injury. And I'm like, okay, well, he's not hurt. So why is this? And then I went on our DraftKings to make sure it wasn't an error. Like I say, our DraftKings in our contest. And to make sure it wasn't an error, and I couldn't find Beck. And so I go over to running back and I find him. And like you said, but I didn't realize that's the reasoning is because he is a running back. So they won't put him below 4K.
Yeah, which I think is a little bit silly because to your point, he's a fullback. He should be like $200, frankly. Yeah. And people probably would still play him and they would get 0 points from him.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, super interesting, but Schultz is even still, just as I mentioned, Schultz is coming off a 17-point week. Miami is not the toughest matchup in the world. Schultz is interesting to me. So
yeah, no, I think it's a really good pick. And honestly, now that I think about it, that's probably why they bottom running backs out at 4K, is so that you can't just put a player in that's super cheap and they get 0 points.
And then stack your insane lineup elsewhere. Okay, yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
Anyways, I agree. Dalton Schultz, an interesting play at 3,300. I thought about that one too whenever I was looking at picks for this week. I also, side note about Dalton Schultz, I do think the Houston-Miami game is sneaky this week and could also be an interesting one to target. Tyreek Hill, stack him with Tua, bring it back with Dalton Schultz. That's interesting to me. Or do like Joe Mixon on the Houston side, bet on, again, coming out of the bye week, him getting rolling, have Tyreek Hill, and maybe also put Dalton Schultz in there. Like, I think it's worth looking at that matchup too this week.
Yeah, I may be misremembering, but I like Miami to win this game, and I think Houston is favorite. So I think there's some interesting things you can do with that game as well. I completely agree with you. And we spent all this time talking about offense. You need a defense to fill out your roster, Austin. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, so I'm going with the Pittsburgh Steelers because they're cheap. And they're a tough defense. It's primarily my thinking there. Like, it doesn't need to be much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
I do think part of the reason this is interesting too, though, is because they are playing the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's a little bit of a game theory move here where I think people are not going to want to play Pittsburgh because they're playing the Eagles. But Pittsburgh has been really good against running backs. And I think that this could be a situation where Saquon Barkley doesn't get shut down, or he doesn't get going, he gets shut down a little bit. Then the Philadelphia Eagles have to rely on Jalen Hurts to kind of pass their way into a victory. And we haven't seen Jalen Hurts get tested like that a lot this season. And I think it honestly could be beneficial for him to get tested like that again before the playoffs happen. So then like he's like ready for when that happens in the playoffs, because it probably will at some point. But for this week, it could be an interesting test, and it could lead to maybe Jalen Hurts gets sacked a couple of times. Maybe he throws a pick, and like the Steelers, they're a frisky team. They're known to have the pick 6-5. Like, they are known for explosive plays on defense. So I like it for a way to get different. It's really cheap, and I think it's actually a good time to bet on like some Jalen Hurts regression for a week and them to be really tested.
Even still, I noticed against the Philly-Dallas game a few weeks ago, Philly will also give up sacks, and that's something that Pittsburgh is very good at with TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith. So,
yeah, they gave up sacks to freaking Carolina Panthers last week, and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, Jalen Hurts in his version of hero ball tends to hold the ball too long, and it works out well for defensive line. So, yeah, I like that as a pickup because you kind of get that safe floor from what they're going to get just out of the sacks alone, to where even if they get 5 sacks but allow 35 points, those kind of like positively cancel. And then if you get a turnover, it works out really well for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I went chalk a little bit. The Denver Broncos are if I remember correctly, second or possibly even highest defense price on FanDuel, but they are the 6th highest on DraftKings, and that's where we play, and that's where I like them. 3,200 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. They didn't hit that 5,000 mark that I refuse to pay for defense. But the fact of the matter is, as I mentioned, quarterbacks making their first start in Denver don't tend to do well. Anthony Richardson already has a little bit of a turnover bug. So I'm going to bet on that defense here. There are other defenses to like on this slate. Everybody's jumping on Baltimore, who I believe is the highest price on both sites. I'm going to go ahead and stay away from Baltimore and go with Denver, Austin, for a lot of the things that you mentioned. If you like a running back from a team, you tend to like that team's defense. And that's what I'm looking to play here with Denver. They were a good defense, a top 5 defense for most of the season. They didn't do great against Jameis Winston, but they did. Jameis Winston obviously went off with 4 touchdowns or whatever. Everybody else had 3 interceptions. It was not a pretty game against Denver going out of that bye. So regardless, I think they're going to be a good play against Indianapolis, who has Anthony Richardson, who can turn the ball over at Jameis Winston levels. So
yeah, I like it. It's definitely a team that I also was looking at this week. I'm also considering them in cash, but I think it's totally fine to still go with them in tournaments too, because them being chalky, that can be fine. It can actually benefit you too if they really hit and you just need them in your lineup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, guys. That basically wraps up the show. However, again, we might have a lot of new people. Austin and I like to go ahead and put our money where our mouth is, except there's no money involved. It's just bragging rights. All the players we've told you about, we're going to try to build lineups where we just go against each other. I mentioned you can do contests with us. This will not be the lineup that Austin runs against you guys. It will be the lineup I run against you because I'm super lazy and I don't build lineups twice. So unless somebody gets hurt, and then obviously I'll change it against you folks. So these are our Thursday lineups. Last week, Austin, I got you by 9 points. Both of our quarterbacks, Mac Jones, Will Levis, scored 7 fantasy points, but my wide receivers did a little bit better than your running backs. And what did I do? I would go ahead and build a 3 running back build, even though you tried to talk me out of one of them, but I built my lineup before the show. So Austin, that puts us at 6-8 on the season with just about 4 weeks left to see if this is even. I did want to point something out, Austin, because people hear this and all we do is talk about how smart you are throughout the show. And then I'm beating you because I'm great. But no, what I wanted to say is when I'm bad, I am so bad. On the 6 weeks where Austin beat me, he probably beat me by 50, 60 points. In the weeks where I beat him by 9. And this goes back to cash versus tourney, Austin, because if you take your average, it's probably a really nice average lineup, even for a Thursday lineup, a really nice average lineup that could take down some cash contests. Whereas for me, I'm going for the big swing. So I'm either going to do very well or very, very badly. Let's see how it shakes out for me this week. My lineup, Austin, is almost, I think I'm reading it now, every player I've already talked about. So Joe Burrow, Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, and I went 3 running backs. I went with Julian McLaughlin in that Denver game. I don't need to add it. I'm not even going to add, we talked about this. So then Jamar Chase, Calvin Ridley, Michael Wilson, Grant Calcaterra, and the Denver defense. I literally, if you need any explanation of my lineup, go back and watch the last 30 minutes of the show. Austin, what do you got for me?
Yeah, so a lot of similar guys that we've already talked about. I've got Bo Nix at quarterback at 6,300. I also have a 3 running back build. We're going with Braelon Allen at 5,400, Derrick Henry at 8,300, and Devon Achane at 7,900.
Love
that leaves me with oops, did a Carolina stack by accident. I realized. We're going with it. Courtland Sutton is one of my receivers at 6,600, and then I accidentally went with both Adam Thielen and Jalen Coker.
Okay.
Some of this was because of salary, because Devon Achane is pretty expensive.
I mean, against Dallas, that's not the worst lineup. So
yeah, we'll see how that one goes. Probably won't actually play that.
That's not going to be in any of Austin's lineups. I can tell you that right now. Just for fun on Thursdays.
Yeah, and then my tight end is Grant Calcaterra. My defense, I actually went with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Okay, I like the Chargers this week. I think a lot of people are going to steer clear of them. Baker Mayfield's been turning the ball over. I love everything Baker Mayfield's doing. I do not slander Baker Mayfield, but he has been turning the ball over a lot recently, Austin. And the Chargers are a sneaky good defense. They're great at stopping the run. And now you have a team coming in with a banged up Bucky Irving and not a lot behind Bucky Irving, at least from an efficiency standpoint. So that's going to force the ball into Baker's hands. And sometimes that forces it back into the defense's hands. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a good pick. One last reminder, folks, you can play DFS with us. Contest every week on DraftKings and FanDuel. A little $2 contest, a little chance to build your bankroll, as we've talked about. Over on DraftKings, last week was won by Guju Man. That's his 4th win all time. On DraftKings, I can see all time. On FanDuel, I can see this season. But took this contest down, Austin. I don't keep track of this. Maybe I should. With 201.38, which I feel like is one of our highest totals that we have seen in our specific contest. So I hope, Guju Man, that you played that somewhere else, because I guarantee it won you a decent amount of money. And Austin, I don't know Jay Malalaga, but we should all know him at this point, as he takes down week 14 with 190.38, a excellent score on FanDuel. But Austin, this is his third consecutive win and his sixth win of the season, where I don't believe anybody else on FanDuel has more than 2. So Jay Malalaga is literally over there just ringering us up and taking all of our money. So congrats to Guju Man, Jay Malalaga. If you guys want to hear your name announced, set a lineup in our contest and win those contests. Austin, before we get out of here, let everybody know the DFS work you put out for Club Fantasy.
Yeah, so you can catch my work 3 times a week. First time will be on Thursdays, where Josh Hudson and I talk the Thursday night showdown slate. So you can join our contest there as well. We run a contest, $2 contest for Thursday nights. You can catch me here every Friday with Ryan talking DFS Academy, where we'll talk cash and tourneys. And then most importantly, my most up-to-date content will be releasing on Saturdays. I write that on Friday night, so I have all the Friday injury reports in play for my DFS Cash article, the A-list that gives you a full DFS Cash lineup that you can start just using that article.
There you go. So watch out for that article on Saturday. Also on Saturday will be the next time you catch Club Fantasy Live. That is Start Sit Different Day. We spend an hour, 11 a.m. Eastern to 12 p.m. Eastern, every Saturday morning just answering your questions. No show sheet, no agenda. We bring great guests on. We answer your lineup questions to help you guys get a win. It is now week 15. You need that win more than ever. There are 3 games on Saturday, so make sure your lineups are set. You get those Saturday players out of your flex spot, do all that kind of fun stuff. But if you have questions, make sure you check out Club Fantasy, our YouTube page. If you haven't hit like and subscribe, do those things. And we'll be live again at 11 a.m. But also, if you want some Sunday morning help, we do a post on Twitter or X or whatever we're supposed to call it. And we tag all of our writers. You guys ask questions and you get like 5 answers. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes they're different. Pick your favorite analyst. Take that advice. If you guys are looking for help, we are here to help you get better at fantasy football. And that is the entire point of the DFS Academy. We will be back next week. Austin will probably need to talk about Christmas week if we need to change the schedule, because it's all falling in the middle of the week, but we'll figure that out as we go. However, you guys will see us again next week. Same bat time, same bat place. Good luck in week 15. Great lineup building. And if you're still in the fantasy playoffs, I hope that works out for you too. See you next week.